going on, everybody? This is the Feed to Embiid. I am your host, Austin Krell, along with my guy, my co-host, Brock Landis. Brock, show them the cap. Show them the new work we got going on over here. There we go. My man looks like a little less Jersey Shore character, but still a Jersey Shore character.
I appreciate that.
There we go. So we have a new coach. We do have a new coach, and his name is Doc Rivers.
Mm-hmm.
They somehow found a way to poach him. Not poach him because he was available to begin with, but that was a really wild timeline of events. Because I remember I was at Yom Kippur dinner, and I get I was at we hosted it this year, so I was in my living room, and I get the Woj bomb, and I'm like, oh, wait, what? Excuse me? And so I'm like my family's all my cousins, my uncles, my dad, we're all reacting to it, and it was wild. And then I never really took it the step further of given the pattern of activity and action that this ownership group would take. Didn't quite occur to me that maybe they would go for him. But I was just sort of it was kind of like a subconscious thought in passing, man, imagine him in Philly. And then 3 days later, he's there.
Yeah.
And it was a wild and bizarre turn of events, especially when you consider, I think Brian Seltzer, a really good reporter for the Sixers, was it was a long, daunting process for them to find the next head coach, but the guy they hired was available 2 minutes, so was made available in the last 2-3 days. So it was just a wild sequence of events and a wild timeline, but I think ultimately they showed the fans and the general public their true colors in that they didn't want to overpay for Ty Lue. That was a big thing that Brian and I were talking about, is that they were constantly, overpaying for Ty Lue. They didn't want to overpay Ty Lue because the market that Billy Donovan had kind of set the market for head coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't want to overpay for somebody they didn't really believe in 100%, even though Ben wanted them. And then Mike D'Antoni becomes available, and ownership really wanted him because they had that previously established relationship. I don't know what his contract looked like. I would imagine that, if a guy like Billy Donovan gets $424, you're probably looking in the same ballpark, maybe a little higher. Mm-hmm. for D'Antoni. But at least it's somebody who would really not revolutionize your offense, but add some creativity to the offense. But then, Doc Rivers, I think, is unquestionably the best name on the market. And when that objectively best name came available, they said, all right, let's fork out the bread. Let's get this done. And they struck fast. Within 2 hours, Mark Stein's reporting, hey, Phillies talked to him. Next day, Jason of the Painted Lines says, that they're going to meet with them. Then Wednesday, Shams is like, yeah, the meeting's going to be held in Philadelphia. John Clark, right after Shams, is like, it's going to happen today. Next day, they sign him. So, this was less than a work week. Less than a work week. He goes from being employed to unemployed to now being employed again, which is an incredibly fast turnaround. So clearly it shows that they got the guy that they all wanted.
Mm-hmm. And on the other end of the spectrum, you don't see Brett Brown's name associated with any team searching for a head coach or an assistant, ironically enough.
Here's my thing. I thought about that, and I also thought, well, how do we know that he got a taste of what it's like to be a head coach and managing those relationships and having the pressure from an ownership group and constant scrutiny? And how do we know that he left Philly wanting to get back into the game?
Yeah, he might not have.
Yeah, we don't know who offered. We don't know, what interest he had. For all we know, he wants to go back to,
San Antonio, maybe with Pop,
or Australia.
Yeah.
You don't really know. And one thing I was thinking, because one of the one of the agents that I talked to kind of like gave me this sort of like this best kept secret on how to like find contacts around the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw it. I was like, this is like a goddamn Fortnite treasure chest. Like I'm like I got my shields. I got my this that. I'll tell you about it privately because I don't want to broadcast that. I know I'm a cheap asshole for that, but I wanted to like sort of.
I didn't know if it was something that you were saying publicly or not.
Nah. It was something. I just wanted to contextualize it.
Yeah. Okay.
It was like I was like I wonder if down the road Brett Brown would be willing to like tell the story and like sort of like where he is now kind of thing, like if he's like found peace, if he's happy to be out of the NBA, or if he's back in the NBA, is he happy to be in the NBA again?
Mm-hmm.
Those were all things that I kind of like was intrigued by, and I thought about it as I was playing Fortnite. and I was like, damn, that's something like 2 years from now, 3 years from now, when I'm a little more established, something that I really want to look into, because I think that would be an interesting story. And I wouldn't even ask him like things like, like, can you tell me what really happened here? But rather just like, how are you?
Mm-hmm.
Like
the person of Brett Brown rather than the coach. Yeah.
Right.
That'd be cool. And with regards to Doc and that hire, I think it was a calculated move, but it's also the right move. And I think those two can coexist. So I think it was a calculated move because you have a rumor that breaks the week of where apparently Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons don't get along. And this rumor wasn't even a quote taken out of context. It wasn't any speculation. It was literally just a fabricated story. It was making nothing out of something, or I should say making something out of nothing, rather. So this rumor breaks, and then there's a Keith Pompey article which talks about management, the dysfunction with management, and also the middle ground that the team is searching for, because Joel Embiid publicly endorses and gives his go-ahead on Mike D'Antoni, whereas Clutch has ties to Tyronn, and that could be problematic with Ben Simmons. So in the midst of all of these rumors surfacing, Philadelphia flies Doc Rivers in. He gets off the plane with no jacket on, which means he's comfortable heading into Philadelphia. He does the interview, and within a couple of days, I believe it was a day actually after the interview, and when management and Doc sat down and watched the playoffs, Philadelphia hires him. So it was calculated because I think it kind of puts an end to all of that speculation that Ben and Joe are really disagreeing right now about who the head coach has to be. And I think it's the right move, too, because regardless of Doc's history as a coach, and we're going to get into that, Doc Rivers walks into this organization. He walks into the locker room with the respect of his peers. I don't care about any of the stories that surface from Boston, any of the chemistry problems in Los Angeles. Doc Rivers is a very well-respected voice. He's an advocate, social activism. A lot of players contacted Doc in the bubble. They went to Doc. They confronted Doc. And it's been this way for a while. He wouldn't have 2 head coaching gigs of 5+ seasons if he wasn't a well-respected guy. So Doc walks into the locker room. He has the respect of his players and the staff, whereas a guy like Mike D'Antoni or a guy like Billy Donovan or even Ty Lue may have to earn that respect. I think it's the right move on top of being calculated because Doc Rivers is a very well-respected guy, and he of course, is a name for Philadelphia to go after to say, hey, look, we're changing our organization around. We're no longer playing in maybe we have to win in this 3-year window, 5-year window. We're winning now, and we're bringing on the coach that we think is better qualified than everybody else to put us in that position.
Sure, for sure. And so it's I think there's like a lot. I think there's. I wouldn't say like any kind of question as to like whether he's the right guy. I think universally he's the right guy. And I think if people think that he's not, they're kind of overthinking it. Like he has a reputation. He's a player's coach, which I mean in today's NBA, whether you like it or not, it sort of means like a black former player is kind of like synonymous with what it means to be a player's coach today, I think. And that's not a bad thing. It's just like that's what it means to me, I think. And so but I think it's the right move in the sense that he's going to command respect. And I think it's the right, and I think he's the kind of guy who's going to hold people accountable. Yeah. And from that aspect, I certainly think it's the right move. Maybe from an X's and O's standpoint, a little too like no pick and roll at all with Brett Brown to like now I'm just going to give you a whole package of pick and roll. It's the only play you're going to know is pick and roll. So I think it's kind of going from one extreme to another. But one thing that I have noticed and kind of read up on is that people who watch the Celtics or cover the Celtics, people who cover the Clippers or watch the Clippers, his out of timeout success was pretty impressive, pretty high. And he would also even like go with like zones on the defensive side of the ball to sort of mess up other teams' out of timeout plays, which I mean, if you're, that alone, that little like change in tactic alone could win you games down the stretch.
Of course.
And then, that can be like 2 to 3 wins more that are on your record. And that can be the difference between having home court and not in the Eastern Conference. So, I mean, I think he's going to help at the margins, which I think in the end is ultimately what you need out of a head coach if you're not one of the markets like a Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And so I think that they got the win there, and that's really what matters a ton. And I don't think I think he's better than like a C+, B- higher, which is what people have kind of remarked. A B. I think he's probably an A- higher, considering all you had out there. I mean, you could have made the argument for, hey, Tyler, like, sure. And I mean, like my high school basketball coach, who I'm like boys with, we text all the time, and he knows I'm a writer, and he knows I cover the team. So he'll ask me questions. Well, he'll send me shit in my articles that I've written. He'll be like, "The fuck are you talking about?" Like, yeah, he'll give me like the fan side of it. So he'll be like, "Listen, just calm down. It's not a big deal. It's just an article." And then he was like, and I kind of talking about the head coaching position, and he was like, if they hire Mike D'Antoni, I'm writing a letter as a fan to the franchise and being like you guys are a joke.
Giving up.
Yeah. Or if he was like, it better not be Ty Lue either. It better be Doc Rivers. And I was like, we'll see.
That's crazy. That's crazy because that's not even close to what I've seen on Twitter and social media in the past week.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and I mean, in all respect to my coach, like he's my guy, I love him. But it isn't like he played in the NBA. Or like he sat in film room with one or both of them and has that context to back it up. I mean, he's obviously watching the NBA all day, all the time. But I mean, it's universally by analysts, by people who are in the league, a good hire.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's entitled to his opinion. I'm entitled to mine. He knows the game better than I do, no doubt. But I think Doc was obviously the right hire. And I think some people do believe that Ty Lue would have been a better hire for this team. And I think if you don't have Joel Embiid on the team, then yeah, probably was the hire then. I think Joel was very much so on board with this decision. Yeah. And that was ultimately, from what I was told, a more significant factor than if Ben was on board with the decision.
Yeah, so I mean, when you think about the roster construction of Philadelphia, right, and looking back at last season and honestly in the past 5 years, you have these Tuesday night games against the Orlando Magic or in Cleveland where Philadelphia loses by 17 points just after beating the best team in basketball. And you really wonder why that is or why they're struggling on the road. And you could tie that into the accountability thing. So the difference may be you can take away maybe 8 to 10 losses last year or 2 years ago, whatever it may be, from Philadelphia, where people aren't held accountable or there isn't an offense executed in times, and blame that on Brett Brown. Whereas I think with Doc Rivers, there's definitely going to be games where there's hiccups, but for the most part, he's going to instill a certain style of play and have these expectations where the players on the team have to meet those expectations. This is a coach that doesn't have many regular seasons below 45 wins, and that's truly a testament to what type of coach he is. So regardless of what the outcomes are in the playoffs, he holds his players to a high standard in the regular season, and they have to meet those demands. For a team like Philadelphia that's young and has a little bit of inexperience in the playoffs, I think that's going to be really beneficial. But when I look at the X's and O's, Austin, here's what I'm looking at. I haven't done too much individual research in players in Doc Rivers systems, but what I can say is in looking at his stints in Boston and both Los Angeles, the team is usually top 10 in terms of defensive rating and true shooting percentage. So, I mean, defensively, of course, the Sixers have the makeup to be a really good defensive team. But Offensively, I'm curious to see how Doc Rivers really instills a different offense. And I say that because I think that Ben Simmons is a really unique player that Doc Rivers could completely unlock in a similar way that I may have anticipated MDA might have been able to do. So if Mike D'Antoni comes in and implements a system that revolves around Ben Simmons, you argue, hey, maybe Ben Simmons is an MVP player. Here's what I'm looking at with Doc Rivers that's encouraging for people that like Ben Simmons or maybe even the Sixers, right? In 2013, Blake Griffin was top 10 in touches, the most in the front court, second most elbow touches, and fifth most post-up. In 2014, Chris Paul is first in touches, Blake Griffin second in elbow touches, ninth in elbow touches. And from 13 to 17, DeAndre Jordan was top 5 in paint touches in all but one season. So there were a lot of mouths to be fed, and Doc Rivers kept them all fed. But I think Chris Paul and Blake Griffin are kind of the combination that Ben Simmons has. So I don't mean any disrespect to Blake Griffin or Chris Paul, but I think Ben Simmons has that type of facilitating instinct and that twitchiness and that point guard instinct that Chris Paul has. While he may not be able to run point for the whole game and Doc might not start him at the one, I think Ben Simmons draws parallels to Chris Paul in terms of passing and running an offense. And you combine that with a player like Blake Griffin, who Doc Rivers relied heavily on, both in the post and the elbow and the half court, doing a lot in the dunker spot, moving around. I think Ben Simmons can be utilized in an MVP way in Doc Rivers' offense, similar to how he could have maybe a Mike D'Antoni offense. So I have to look at how I think Doc may use DeAndre Jordan because DeAndre Jordan was always getting touches in the paint, so maybe that can correlate to Joel Embiid getting touches in the paint, posting up. Who knows? But I think looking at what he did with Chris Paul and Blake Griffin is encouraging, and Rajon Rondo too. I mean, talk about point guards without jump shots. Rondo had some of his best years in Boston.
Yeah.
His best offensive ratings came in 2008 and 2007 under Doc. His defensive ratings were awesome. Net ratings were awesome. True shooting was awesome. So he demands a lot out of his players, and they buy into his system. So I think Ben Simmons is going to have a huge year under Doc Rivers, and I'm also curious to see what else they do with the rest of that roster. Also, I know there's rumblings, maybe Buddy Hield gets traded to Sacktown to Philadelphia, maybe even Chris Paul. You never know, but I don't think that the roster today is the roster we're going to see open day for Philadelphia next season.
So what I think is this. I think when he was in Boston, he had pieces that were very defense-oriented, and the culture there was defensive-minded. And, I mean, their defensive rating reflected that. They were an elite defensive team during his time in Boston. I don't mean like elite, like top 10. I mean like top 5, consistently top 5. And they obviously won a championship. And then in L.A., they get, Lob City. Chris Paul gets shooters. They basically turned J.J. Redick into not just a good shooter, but one of the best of all time. And then they had Kawhi and Paul George. So I mean, the defensive rating wasn't there, but the offensively they were a juggernaut. Whether it was his coaching or his systems or what. So I do believe that he has the mind to put a system into place where defensively and offensively they're actually functioning in some kind of structure. It's like a well-run machine, that sort of thing. That doesn't mean necessarily that he's not going to have great assistants behind him or that he didn't have that previously. But I think that there's actual tangible evidence that he can be an X's and O's coach. And I also think that he's a tremendous culture builder. If you recall, he was the coach back when the Donald Sterling thing happened, and he was the one rallying the Clippers together when they felt ultra slighted because the owner of the team was a racist and was outed as such during the playoffs. So I mean, the fact that the Doc could hold them together in spite of that is pretty impressive. Now, you said like trade scenarios and the kind of things that that. Could the roster construction next year could be different. So remember, like when this past week, we talked about we talked about, but that guy Rashad Phillips
Yeah.
drops that rumor saying, like talk soon, Yoda, whatever the hell he goes by. But Doc is going to try to trade LaMelo Ball or like
Man.
number one pick / LaMelo Ball for Ben Simmons. And we were all like clowning him about that. And it does sound ridiculous. Like it is, because Ben's a 23-year-old established star. Despite what the boomers want to tell you, he is a star. And LaMelo Ball is this unproven top pick in a weak class. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. So like I put out this tweet that it was sort of like not a shot, because I try not to like diss people who are, I guess, are bigger than me.
Mhm.
But it was sort of like a talk soon. Like I was like, talk soon. This doesn't make any sense. Because it doesn't make any sense. And then because this is the same guy after all who was like Luka Doncic would average 10 and 5 in college if he played. And
Mhm.
he was like a basic player, which is obviously very far from the truth now. But like 20 minutes later, I get a text from one of the agents that I talked to. And usually when he texts me, it isn't like out of the blue, like, hey, how you doing? It's like, yo, I'm hearing this, I'm hearing that. And then I'll go and like talk to Brian about it, or I'll go and like I'll continue the conversation, try to make sense of what he's telling me and figure out if it's like reportable or not. But he was like, yo, Rashad might be right this time. And I was like, wait a minute, wait a minute. What are you saying here? Apparently, part of the interview process with Doc Rivers was asking what he would change about the team. And apparently his answer included trading Ben Simmons. And apparently those in the meeting liked that response. So I don't
A
know if
lot of
it's
apparentlys for me to believe.
listen, it's just an agent who's giving me good information in the past. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but it seems like, reading the tea leaves, Ben hasn't yet publicly commented on Doc Rivers. Joel is obviously very on board with the hiring. We've heard sort of the whispers that Ben is he wasn't mad about it. He's just indifferent to it. It wouldn't shock me if they're like favoring Joel over Ben long term, and if they have to trade one, he's the one to go. Now, would Clutch Sports allow him to get traded to Minnesota? Or in other words, like, would they put out some shit like that would be like reduce his trade value? Or like, who knows? But I think we're looking at a situation where I'm not sure that they're going to trade him this offseason for a guy that hasn't done anything in LaMelo Ball. But it wouldn't shock me if, as next season goes on, if it's clearly still an issue, nothing's working, he's not shooting, and the team just isn't good enough, and it's obvious. It wouldn't shock me if the trade rumors start to get really, really, really loud, and it wouldn't shock me if he's the one to go, because I think his trade value is actually real, and I think Joel's as good of a player as he is in terms of like trade value relative to what the player is worth. I don't know that you're ever going to get equal value for Joel. Like I'm sure, obviously someone would give up pieces or picks or whatever for Joel, but it doesn't mean that those are going to be a good enough return for what Joel does for you. So I think if you're going to get equal value, it's going to come from trading Ben Simmons.
The unfortunate thing is that a lot of players under the age of 25 are expendable in professional sports now. And with how empowered players are, MLB, NFL, NBA, if they want to be traded, if they're not happy with the situation they're in, they can most likely get out of that situation. Now, I don't think it's too common teams trade away their star players if there's no turmoil and if it doesn't look like they're going to hit a dead end. So as far as Philadelphia is concerned, you bring in Doc for a multi-year extension. You try to build for the next couple of seasons around Ben and Joe. And I think that's the plan. I think as much as they say they're going to entertain trades, I don't really think they are. And I think to ask a coach in his first interview what you would maybe do to alter the roster or change things around, what you would do, I think the coach is just going to say whatever's on his mind to get that job. But the Sixers have enough problems in their front office and deciding who's making decisions and who's the head of basketball operations to worry about what the hell a guy doing an interview with them should do with their roster. So as of right now, I think Ben and Joe are safe. I hope that's what the team intends to do, especially not for LaMelo Ball. But like I said, my preface there, a lot of young players get traded. Just thinking there's a ton of guys in the NBA, Anthony Davis, there's Jamal Adams in the NFL. There's a lot of good stars that get traded before they turn 25, 26 years old.
Well, wasn't it a little different though? Like Jamal Adams was very clearly unhappy.
Yeah, but that's what I'm like. In the NBA, there's a whole wave of players that I can think of off the top of my head that were traded before they were 25 years old. Maybe not even traded because there's turmoil, but like I said, they either just forced themselves out. The situation wasn't good. The team knew that the situation wasn't going to be good. It was going to go stale. Kristaps Porzingis, AD, Shea. There's a lot of guys in the NBA.
Did you say Shake?
No, not Shake Milton. SGA.
There we go. Okay. I was like, listen, Shake's a nice player, but at this point,
I don't know what his value would be right now. Maybe they get poach LaMelo Ball for him.
Exactly. So now we go on to the NBA Finals, and the Lakers are up 2-0, and I think the Lakers have shown that healthier, if Miami's healthy or not, doesn't really matter. They're the better team in the series. I mean, that's what they've shown in the series. And as always, I invite Sixers fans, viewers, Miami Heat fans, whatever you want, people who are watching this, listening to this, whatever. I invite them to join the show, add comments, questions, whatever. Again, the Feed to Embiid is always brought to you by Painted Line, sponsored by the King Cobra Co. The best shotgunning tool you can find for your beers, Sunday beers for the NFL especially. But I think one thing that the Lakers are doing like supremely well, two things, is number one, LeBron is completely bought into just doing whatever he has to do to win this series. I mean, he has absolutely just been like, he's happy. He's been happy to defer to AD. I mean, AD is posting up from like 18 feet out, and he's just facing up, jabbing jumpers. And LeBron's like, listen, I'm here if you need me. I'll take it hard to the cup whenever you want me to, but go to work. And he's been fine with it because it's getting them results, and it's a clear mismatch for the Heat, whether Bam's there or not. And so I think that they've done a good job with that. And I also think that they've done a remarkable job of exploiting Miami zone and really getting that dribble penetration working. And then they're kicking to shooters. And even though Danny Green can't hit the broadside of the barn, they're somehow the Lakers are making shots. And it's just crippling the Heat. I mean, they have looked completely mismatched and out of it in the series through 2 games.
Yeah, that's the right word to use there, mismatched. Now, unfortunately, there have been a ton of injuries to Miami, and kudos to the Heat because they've gotten this far and they've had an awesome season. But with the Lakers, it really is just a mismatch. Austin, I think you hit the nail on the head there. You got a guy like LeBron James, who is arguably the most dangerous player in the world, deferring to Anthony Davis, who's second to none in terms of his domination. I mean, the dude can post you up from 18 feet out. If he's not posting you up, he can shoot spot-up shots. He can work from beyond the arc. He can dissect defenses within the paint. There's really no wall that can stop him, and he's amazing at drawing contact. You talk about players that elevate their game in the playoffs, and Anthony Davis has taken more and made more two-pointers and mid-range field goal attempts in this playoff stretch than he did in the regular season. So the mid-range is not completely dead. I think that's the second or third week where we've talked about that, the mid-range helping players out in the playoffs, and AD's been one of those guys to elevate his game. So with the Lakers, you get a ton of middle drives right now to try to break that zone and bust that zone. The middle drive is great because they're able to take advantage of moving parts on Miami's defense. They have flashers, so they're taking advantage of that gravity. If they're driving middle, somebody steps up to guard that. They got a guy in the dunker spot perfectly positioned. So they're doing a good job offensively there. And it's really just the mismatches. They're capitalizing on them offensively, defensively too, and on the boards more specifically. When Miami plays zone, they like to station their bigger guys at the front of the zone, or at the top, I should say. So when you get a guy like Kendrick Nunn down low on a 2-3, Anthony Davis is going to win that box out 11 out of 10 times. So the Lakers have really just capitalized on the mismatches. They're up 2-0, and if it's not a 4-0 sweep, Miami's going to lose the series regardless of the number of games they play.
You hate to see it.
I know.
I know.
You love to see it. You love what you're seeing, man.
You hate to see it.
A long year, but I guess
you hate to see
Miami loses in the finals, you will have prevailed, Austin. You came out triumphant.
You just hate to see it.
Second is just as good as last.
Hate to see it. I will say this: if Miami were to win this series, it would debunk everything that you thought you knew about the NBA as it is currently, because
which basically has happened this year. I mean, you get no Lakers Celtics, you get no Clippers against the Lakers.
But those other teams have like 2 to 3 guys who you would like hold in star status, though.
Yeah.
Whereas like the Heat, they develop Bam, Tyler Hero bursts onto the scene, they empower him. They take Duncan Robinson off the undrafted scrap heap, and they turn him into a top 5 3-point shooter in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Butler comes in. Obviously, they have 1 star. And they sort of debunked everything you thought you knew about the NBA. Yeah. Now, I think they're just like 1 or 2 depth pieces, maybe a little shy of being able to take down a team that has 2 like top 5, top 6 players in the Lakers. But I think that the Heat were unquestionably the best team in the East this season. Certainly the most constructive. They're the best constructed to win and get to this point where they are. I don't think. In other words, I don't think that this is like a fluke. Is what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if you noticed this. I don't know if anyone else noticed this, but it's a pretty big problem that the guy that you signed to a 4-year deal for $140 million, your star, has a matchup with like Alex Caruso down the stretch of that game too, and he's electing to like kick out to Jay Crowder instead of like bodying him down to the paint and doing what Jimmy Butler does, getting fouled or getting to the rim. He just says, "Nah, I don't want this," and just defers to Jay Crowder. Like they were still in the game. They were still in the game at that point in time, and you're expecting him to like your star player to take over, as star players should do. And instead he's like, "Nah, Jay, you take it." And he's like, it's like a little shuffle pass out to Crowder. So I thought that was problematic. And it's sort of been what his tenure in Miami has looked like. He's kind of become a more willing passer. Even if there are times when it's like, okay, now go be a star, go score the ball. You have a mismatch. You have a guy who very clearly can't guard you. Go do it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think Miami was the perfect situation for Jimmy Butler.
You have this conversation like literally every other podcast.
Yeah. You've got a team of young, impressionable guys with chips on their shoulders, and they're all good ball players. So they've had a fantastic season, and there's no taking that away from them. But ultimately, LeBron James and Anthony Davis are proving more dominant physically, offensively, and defensively. But Austin, let me ask you this now, right? Is this an NBA Finals win, or is this an NBA bubble Finals win for the winner of the championship?
I think it's the hardest one championship we've ever had.
The hardest one. So we talked about it a week or two ago. It's like you can't really compare it to any other championship because you've got the adversity of maybe Kobe Bryant's death. You have the adversity of COVID-19 impacting the start and stop, the one location. So you think it's the hardest championship?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, like, there's no travel.
Yeah. So there's
really no home court.
Uh-huh.
There's nowhere to go. You're in a bubble, so it's like all you have to do really is rest and prepare for the next game via film or taking care of your body or getting shots up when you're not playing. These teams are all coming into these series, and unless one team like won a series 4-0 and then their opponent went to 7 games, it isn't like everyone's not on the same level of rest or having to travel or have a home court behind them. It's a pretty level playing field, and I think that the results have reflected that. Like, I think if the Clippers had home court, they probably beat the Nuggets. If the Sixers have a chance to just play a game or two against a Celtics team, maybe that series turns out a little different. Probably not too different, but like maybe it's a not as much as like a walkthrough as it was for the Celtics.
Thankfully, they expedited the process, though. So I'm glad the Celtics were able to get Brett Brown fired, using the process incorrectly there. But Boston expedited that. So thank you, Jason Tatum and company. You got Brett Brown fired.
Also, we're gonna talk about how like Brad Stevens just like wasn't very good in those conference finals. Like
he decided not to show up.
Yeah,
he decided not to show up.
Everyone says that's like the genius coach behind it all, and here we are. He
did adjust well. Miami's zone was something that really threw Boston off for the first 2 or 3 games, and when you get behind like that, it's tough to claw back and fight for an entire series. And even Denver can come out with a moral victory from the bubble because they clawed back from 2-1 and had a really historic playoff run with their young core. So this offseason, it's going to be crazy. There's going to be a lot of turnaround because you've got a looming Giannis Antetokounmpo decision in the Eastern Conference. Right now, as a member of Milwaukee, I believe he has one more season until he's unrestricted. So Milwaukee could either potentially extend that contract. They could trade him if he doesn't want to stay there. He can end up in Golden State with Steph and Clay. You never know what Giannis is going to do.
You're thinking like 18 moves ahead. I love it.
Yeah. And then you got Victor Oladipo, who probably doesn't want to return and will not return to Indiana.
I don't know. That's not what he said.
What is there a new emergence in that story?
He said like I don't know where these rumors are coming from. Like I'm a Pacer, whatever. But
you see, I'm contributing to exactly what I hate, the mass hysteria. And let me also add this because I didn't say earlier in the show. This is in regards to Doc Rivers. I think comparing the Clippers or maybe the Boston Celtics to the Philadelphia 76ers is a false equivalency. You look at the Clippers, right? And you wonder how they blow through one lead and why Doc Rivers, if he's such a well-respected guy, wasn't able to keep the locker room cool. And I think like you've got Kawhi Leonard, who's a grown-ass man that just won a championship in Toronto, right? You've got Paul George, also a grown-ass man with playoff experience, and he's been doing this for a little while. You've got Lou Williams, who's certified. He's as real as it comes, one of the best hoopers in the league for 2+ decades. You've got Pat Beverly. You've got Montrezl Harrell. So you've got all these different personalities and all these grown men on one team, right? I don't think any of them compare in terms of personality to a 25-year-old Joel Embiid or a 23-year-old Ben Simmons. I really don't see how any of those personalities match up. And also, who's to say that Ben and Joe, who maybe didn't respond well under Brett, wouldn't have responded better under a guy like Doc Rivers? And then I think about the Boston teams, and you've got a Rajon Rondo, you've got a Ray Allen, you've got a Kevin Garnett, you've got a Paul Pierce, Kendrick Perkins, all of these really eccentric personalities. And these guys were in the league, already established veterans and stars. And of course, you're going to butt heads with your head coach. Of course, that stuff's going to happen. Rajon Rondo and Doc Rivers said they wanted to they wanted to punch each other in the face. Chris Paul has made 2 or 3 public statements about Doc Rivers' preferential treatment, maybe favoring Austin Rivers over him in the playing rotation. But at the end of the day, I think there's more good with bad than there is with Doc Rivers. I think all of these clashes are bound to happen when you've got so many personalities on one different team. These have all been star teams that Doc has coached. And also, I said this because of the mass hysteria thing that we just talked about. As an aspiring personality in sports, I guess I'll say, one of the things that really bothers me is people that aren't in locker rooms or people that don't know players personally or people that don't know the situation speaking on it and manipulating narratives and perpetuating rumors. All of this stuff, it's just smoke screening. It's just putting stuff out there. I don't appreciate that. So as much as you want to read into the stories about Doc having bad chemistry or locker room problems or this or that, you also have to be a skeptic. So you got to make sure that you're not believing and hearing everything you see. So ultimately, I think it's a great hire for Philadelphia. I think he fell right into the Sixers' lap. And Austin, I think you and I are pretty much on the same page there.
Yeah. There's also a story that I heard on the Royce to Ricky Sanchez today about Doc, where he like allegedly kind of like mailed it in after a certain number of years, like he was canceling practices to go play golf, which kind of falls into that like
sounds like the president.
Yes, it does. So I mean, I'm sure there's always two sides to a story, and I'm sure that goes more than like just like Doc didn't do a good enough job of this, or he was bad at this. It goes both ways. There's a lot of egos to manage, and there's not always like equal pulling of weight.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think ultimately time will tell. But I will tell you this: I think we're going to hear a massive, massive uptick in trade rumors around Joel and Ben.
Yeah, probably.
If they like end up with like a 52-30 record, or like they don't get out of the second round, I think we're going to start hearing those rumors real hard, because I think at that point you'll be through. You'll have cycled through two coaches. Well, one will still be there, but cycled through two essentially, because you've had two different guys coach team. Two GMs and like 6 different iterations of the roster, and which is just ridiculous to think about. But eventually it's going to be like, okay, the elephant in the room is clearly these two don't fit. And I think, like I've always been an advocate of Ben Simmons does not need to shoot the basketball from the outside. And in fact, I've always advocated it's a waste of a possession, because what are the odds that like good shooters, good outside shooters miss 60% of the shots that they take.
Mm-hmm.
So what is a guy like Ben Simmons, who has a corkscrew, might even be shooting with the wrong hand, which I actually believe that theory. Like, what are the odds that on a consistent basis, if he puts up like 2 or 3 jump shots every game, that one is going to go in? I don't know that I buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I just think that if this team had they had allocated money to like Bojan Bogdanovic or shooters, like if they had brought back Redick, as much as people don't like Redick for whatever reason.
People really didn't like Redick this week.
I loved JJ. I thought, well, so I'll say it this way: back before I realized that I wanted to be in media and that I had to be objective, and I was still like a fan of the team in a sense, I was like, this guy is a huge reason as to why they're like 36-30, and on about to go on like a 17-game win streak the year after they went 28-54. Like, JJ did so much for them, as much of the shortcomings he had on the defensive side of the court. He was everything to them in a lot of ways, and you could make an argument that the impact that he had on the team was like all-star level. Yeah. So I mean, I think ultimately, like the decisions they've made with Horford and Harris, I think that's going to ultimately end up expediting the timeline where you have to like live with Joel and Ben together, because things just don't fit. And if you can't get off of the Horford or the Harris contract, you can't free up money, you're going to have to trade someone who has trade value. And that someone, to me, is first and foremost by far Ben Simmons. And if you can get like a guy like a Bradley Beal or a Devin Booker, those are all guys who you're like, all right, do a deal. Let's get it done.
Speak for yourself, man. I can't say the same. Not right now, at least. But
no. I know. I'm not advocating for trading. I think they're both top. I think Ben's a top 15 player, top
Mhm.
20, top 15 player. I think Joel, when he's trying, is a top 5, top 10 player.
Mhm. Absolutely. But to me, right now, when I think of trade value for either one, the way you feel about Embiid is probably how I feel about both of Ben and Joe. Um, I think in terms of return, probably you're right. You can squeeze a little more out of Ben Simmons because you can convince a team to kind of build around him
I think it's a lot more.
more than you might be able to with Joe. But ultimately, at the end of the day, when I scan the league, it's probably less players on my hands that I can count that I would want to trade Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid for. So, of course, if you hit that standstill where it's kind of like we're not going to get any better, we're not going to win, there's no more roster reconstruction we can do, then I think you start to maybe devalue Ben and Joe, and then you take the best available package. But in the immediate future, I don't even want to think about splitting the two of them up. I would waste their entire primes trying to reconstruct a roster around them to fit, then sacrifice that, trade them away, and have them go win for a club that maybe prioritizes winning with them more than they do in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, it sounds like Philadelphia is still looking for a guy to kind of serve under Elton Brand and kind of help with that decision making. But Austin, who knows what's going on behind the scenes? Because you've told me before, not even off the record, just speculation that maybe Elton Brand is like a puppet or maybe a messenger making decisions for the higher ups and then being scapegoated for them. And now this Keith Pompey article surfaces where the organization is apparently keeping everybody in their front office, except they're not going to have a say in anything. They're just going to be there for information, which I don't know what the hell that means, but that's what Keith Pompey indicated in his most recent article.
Yeah, and then Trapnap says Simmons for LaMelo. That was 19 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago. And then he says, who would you rather trade, Joel or Ben? I think so. I think this city's always going to have a bigger emotional tie to Joel because he was like the first star of the process. And like he was always the one that you needed to win games, and he always like bought into it, was the fun guy. So I think that they'll always be attached to him. And I suppose when I wasn't trying to be objective, I would have said, I would trade Ben, I guess. But I think if we're going to be really honest with ourselves in terms of like looking at the landscape of the NBA, looking at like the pieces on the team, I think you have to trade Joel. If you have to, I think I'd rather trade Joel than Ben, even though I think both should be untradeable. Because I think the league is going away from guys that can defend pick and rolls, or not that, like bigs that can defend pick and rolls, and like the drop defense that you want Joel to use to anchor the rim doesn't work, and smaller guys can go around him. And his defense, we've seen, has suffered in recent years because of the movement outside of the perimeter with really no bigs. And this kind of goes back to another thing I want to say about Doc Rivers is like people are like, oh well, maybe now he can get Ben to shoot jumpers, which is possible, maybe, and then maybe he can get Joel to stay in shape. I hate that narrative more than anything. I despise that narrative because if you just look at his body construction, the way he's built, he's never going to look like he's in shape. He's a naturally big dude. He's not a Rudy Gobert. He's not an Anthony Davis. He's not a string bean. He's going to be a big load of a guy. That's his advantage. What?
I'm kidding.
Oh man,
I'm messing with
he's never going to look in shape. But let's stop conflating it with this guy doesn't eat right. He doesn't take it seriously. I just don't think it's his natural build. Some guys are just naturally going to be big guys, and I think that's Joel Embiid. And I think like whether he, people are just dying for him to have his hands on his knees for like for like a one play to show like, oh hey, like he can't breathe, he's not in shape. Brock, we're gonna let your dad in. We're gonna let Mike.
Oh, God.
Mike, we're gonna let Mr.
Friend of the
Landis.
pod.
We're gonna let Mr. Landis in here.
You sure about that?
Mr. Landis, how you doing today, sir?
Good. How are you? I'm doing good. I'm always
Not doing great now that you're here. So we're talking right now. Brock, I want you to go next because he asked the question: who would you rather trade, Joel or Ben?
So I don't really think there's a right way to answer this question because I think it makes one of them a villain, and I don't want to do that. I mean, you know what my stance is here. I don't want to trade either of them, but because I have to answer, I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to trade Joe, and the reason why is because I think these multi-positional lockdown defenders and also offensive threats on both the glass and transition are invaluable players. That's the direction the league is heading in. So I think you'd be able to build around Ben more comfortably than you would with Joe. I associate the center position with the running back position in football almost, where you get a ton of production out of that position, but it's also one of the most replaceable positions in the sport. There's constantly a new running back being drafted to replace the current one, the same way there is constantly with big men. Big men have shelf lives. They get hurt. They get replaced. A guy like Ben Simmons is more unique and more rare, in my opinion. So I'm going to trade Joe if I have to trade one.
And Mr. Landis, how about you? Who would you rather, to answer this gentleman's question, Trap Nap on YouTube, who would you rather trade, Joel or Ben?
Well, first of all, you don't trade either of them right now because it's not really rocket science right here. It's simple. You add 2 shooters to this team and they win. It's as easy as that. There's no doubt about it that Ben Simmons does not have to shoot the ball.
Yes, there we go.
He does not have. What he does have to do is shoot foul shots.
That I agree.
Okay? Because if Ben Simmons is willing to shoot foul shots, he's going to average 24 a game, right? Because he's going to he gets the basket whenever he wants, right?
Yeah.
All right. So now if he initiates contact, he's scoring 16 a game. He's going to score 6 or 7 more points from the foul line. So now he's scoring 24. He's getting 10 boards and 10 assists, basically. What else do you need out of your point guard? Why does that guy have to shoot 3-pointers? It's one of the dumbest things I ever heard, actually, in the game. If you don't want to put shooters around them, okay, I can understand it. So what did they do? They gave up JJ, right? Well, okay, he hurts you down the stretch defensively, but so does Kimball Walker. Right? Boston got killed with him on the court at the end of games. Mm-hmm. Right? They gave up Ballinelli. They gave up Shamet. Right? Those are 3-point shooters.
Yeah. And
all of a sudden, that they weren't good enough. Those Simmons and Embiid all of a sudden can't play together. Except if we had Jimmy Butler here, they could play together. It's an odd scenario there that people say they can't play together. So you give up shooters and you bring in Al Horford. Why? You know you need shooters. If Brett Brown wants to have a team with shooters and they bring in Al Horford, those moves make no sense to me. So go out, get yourself 2 guys who can shoot the basketball. I don't care if you get them at the Y or in the draft or wherever you get them. Because in all reality, all you need is set shooters. Because look at the NBA now. Guy stands in one corner, guy stands in the other. What did you say? Jimmy Butler drives all the way down. Right. It's. I coach basketball. It's mind-boggling to me that they're giving up layups for threes. I get it because you need to let me make less threes to win the game. I get it because that's what I do at my high school team. I said you shoot threes. That's fine. So, but what did Butler do? He drives down the lane. And he tosses it out to a guy standing in the corner to shoot a 3. That's the game now. So go get 2 set shooters. Listen, go back to Iverson. Who was the only coach who coached him right? Larry Brown. How come? Right. Give me Allen Iverson and 4 guys who play defense. That's it. And what happened? Got to the championship.
Imagine that. Roster construction actually matters. Who would have thought that?
It absolutely matters. And coaching.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. So, Mr. Landis, so we're talking about the Doc Rivers hiring, which I think people are very everyone wants to have an opinion on it, and I think when you really think about it at a deep level, maybe he's not the best coach in the NBA, but the best coaches in the NBA they're the best coaches because they're still employed and they're not available.
Yeah,
and I think when you look at the market, like Mike D'Antoni has had countless talent on his team, never got to the finals. Ty Lue, I think is a better coach than given credit for, but Doc Rivers is obviously the best candidate on the market, and for that reason, it was the right hiring. What do you think about the hiring of Doc Rivers?
It was for what's out there. It's absolutely the right hiring. I mean, I'm not a fan of Ty Lue. I'm not exactly. I know he's well regarded. I don't know what he brings to the table. Honestly, I've watched those teams play. I don't. Look, it's hard to gauge anybody who's coach. When LeBron, because LeBron's a coach on the court,
right?
So it's hard to tell really what kind of coach he would be. D'Antoni, I don't know. The guy, I wouldn't have minded because I'm sure he would have came with a plan to make them better. Doc, I actually went back and I read some stuff and I looked at some of what Doc does. He runs the pick and roll, but he doesn't run it. He runs a lot of off the ball movement. His teams move. They're looking for backdoors, and he does want to get the ball in the post. Well, they have who could be the best post player. The two who could be the best post players in the league on the same team if they wanted to do it. So, I would like to give him an opportunity to see what he brings to the table. Do I think he's a good coach? Yeah. But let's see who he brings in with him, because from what I read or what I've seen, Alvin Gentry was the offensive genius behind him. That's who came up with his stuff. And Gentry, who was he the assistant for in the 2000s? MDA. So it's a circle. They're all the same, and what I saw Doc say is he's finally come to the realization you need to play zone in the NBA. Yeah, he's probably right.
Yeah. No, and I mean, look at the Miami Heat. I mean, everyone's look at this team, like they're debunking modern basketball. Maybe they're not debunking it. Maybe they're using it to their advantage that no one else uses zone anymore.
Actually,
going into zone.
Actually, what is a disgrace about that is NBA players can't figure out how to beat that zone.
No, they have no idea. It's great. I love it. They're very tentative. They don't know how to. They're like, do I shoot this? Do I attack the rim? And I'm like, just flash someone high post and hit somebody high post, and then just move. Like, that's all you got to do.
You're taught from when you're 8 years old how to beat a zone. It's simple. You got odd sets and even sets. So actually, the Lakers are doing it. They're throwing AD to elbow extended, or sometimes in the middle, and they're putting LeBron down in the post. I mean, that's the way you beat a zone. And you stick shooters out there. It's fairly simple. That's why I don't know why enough teams didn't zone up the Rockets enough, because Rockets had no inside game. So teams should have just played a 1-3-1 or a 3-2 against the Rockets. Yeah. But this Miami zone, I don't get what is so confusing about it. I really don't. I don't understand the Celtics that being that confusing either. I mean, it's you move the ball, you beat it. Go
exactly right.
Inside middle to the outside. It's not that silly. Not that funny.
Brock, so I know I'm sure you talk to your dad quite often about the game, but did you have any questions for your dad?
No.
All right. Well, Mr. Landis, we really appreciate you coming on. We got to go, but thanks for taking time out of your day to come talk with us for a little bit.
All right. Go ahead. See you.
Take care. So that's Brock Landis' dad, Mr. Landis, Mike Landis. What a mind for the game. I mean, he had me he had me sold. As soon as he says Ben Simmons doesn't have to shoot 3-pointers, I was like, that's it. That's our guy. That's going to be our post-game analyst coming forward for years to come. When this podcast is still running in 2037, he's going to be the post. He's going to be the Jimmy Lynam for us.
Good.
The last thing before we go, Alex Smith wants to know Andrew Wiggins pick number 2 for Simmons to Golden State.
Forget it, bro.
I'm not laughing at the question. I'm laughing at the fact that Brock was so triggered by it that he was like, "All right, I'm out." I would not do that trade, and I think if anyone were to do that trade, they'd be fired. Brock, can you try to verbalize how you feel about that instead of just walking away?
Andrew Wiggins. Andrew Wiggins and Anthony Edwards for Ben Simmons. Is that the return on investment you want there? That's not the one I want. That's not the one I want.
Or Andrew Wiggins.
I mean, you talk about
hold on. Andrew Wiggins, James Wiseman for Ben Simmons. We're gonna have all power forwards and centers now. Just Al Horford, James Wiseman, Joel Embiid, and we have Tobias Harris.
Laughable payroll in the NBA because you've got Andrew Wiggins making $29 million a year. Then you'd have Tobias Harris making 34, and then you'd have Al Horford making $20+ million a year, all on the same team. So, Alex Smith, we appreciate you. I'm not trading Ben Simmons. I'm not doing it for the number 1, 2, or 3 pick.
Yeah, no, and Alex, we appreciate you for throwing it out there. We're not laughing at you. We're laughing at the. we're like Andrew Wiggins. Really, is that like?
It's the people that have come before you, Alex Smith, that ruined it for you. It's the stupid trades that have come before that one that ruined it for you because we've had to deal with it for too long now.
Brock, so when you turn 21?
Yeah, December.
Okay, yeah. So you got about 2 months until you actually can shotgun a beer. Funny story, actually.
The sip of alcohol comes in 2 months.
Yeah. Funny story about this, actually. So I'm looking at my phone at 1 in the morning, and like one night last week, and I see the feed to Embiid has a new DM, and so I'm like, it's probably some Heat fan casting hate, or it's Dan Morgan who is trying to talk to me, yeah, something like that. And it's a random listener, and he has one of those egg emojis for not the emoji, but one of those egg icons for his avatar. So I'm like, this is interesting. I'll answer this. And he goes, yo, I bought one of the Cobras, but the code didn't work, and so I ended up having to pay full price. and so. I'm trying not to laugh, but I'm like, oh, sorry about that. I can Venmo you the remainder because it isn't it's not super expensive. So I'm with my buddy yesterday, who is the founder, CEO, and president of the King Cobra, and so I was telling him the story. I was like, Jack, this happened. He's like, no way, and he shows me the app where he handles the Cobras, and the code is still active. Trust the Cobra 10. In all caps and in all one word is still very active. So then I realized, oh, this guy probably entered the code in wrong, or my dumbass fell for it.
Yeah, you might have gotten trolled.
Yeah, exactly right. But that was just a funny story. Anyway, well, Brock, when you turn 21, we're gonna have to shotgun a beer.
Okay.
And if you like shotgunning beer, you're probably gonna want to increase your shotgun time at parties. If you do, check out my boys at the King Cobra. King Cobra is a shotgunning tool that makes the perfectly symmetrical shotgunning tool under a second. It's also a tab puller, a vent puncher, and it all fits on a keychain. For more information about the King Cobra, check them out on Instagram at the King Cobra Co. That's the King Cobra Co. And Cobra is spelled with a K. For a 10% discount on all products, enter the code TrustTheCobra10, all caps, all one word. Pick up yours today. Brock, any parting shots for you today?
No parting shots. I'm going to have a Doc Rivers video out by Sunday, hopefully. Next Sunday, that is. So
yeah, I meant to ask you about this. Do you not write articles because you like doing videos more? Because I feel like articles are easier than videos.
It's funny you say that. I used to write the script for my videos and then upload that as a written article. So I'd write the article. What I did, I've been writing for a while, so I just write everything. I found out that I can make the YouTube videos with the stuff I write, but instead of reading the article, like a robot, I can just kind of put stats up and read on my own. So right now I've supplemented writing with doing the videos. I think it's just it's more fun to make, and I think the visual component helps people out a lot more than maybe just reading. This person had a 111 offensive rating. Maybe it's just a little better to see them doing something or see why they had that. You know what I
like
mean?
it. I like it. Well, Brock recently did a great video on Mike D'Antoni. Of course, that's kind of
it was fun while it lasted, but
yeah.
now we got to work on the real head coach.
Yeah. So be on the lookout for that video. Brock's videos are always phenomenal. Always very good content. I always find myself enjoying them. I, along with Brian and Jason, came up with the inside story. Not kind of that's a weird way of playing it. I wouldn't say that. I would say we spent weeks of collaborating and gathering information from various connections to put together the inside story and the hiring. So, be sure to read that. That's done pretty well. You can find us on Twitter at Landis Brock. His cap has been peeled, so don't be alarmed if the individual you find has a mullet. It's the same guy, just a haircut. You can find me. My new handle is NBA Krell. Decided to change it up. As always, thank you for listening to the Feed to Embiid. Make sure to give us a subscription on Apple Pods, a 5-star rating, and a review. As always, thank you for tuning into a Feed to Embiid. Enjoy football today. Eagles play at 8:20. Brock, again, to win tonight.
Far from it. On the national stage too.
There we go. He's Brock Landis. I'm Austin Krell. Take care, everybody. Have a good night.